She was 3 years old, asleep in her bed, and vanished without a sound. 16 years later, we still don't know what happened to Madeleine McCann. It was supposed to be the perfect family vacation, May 3rd, 2007. Praia da Luz, Portugal. A small, quiet resort town with whitewashed villas, palm-lined walkways, and golden beaches where the sun didn't seem to set. It was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. Jerry and Kate McCann, both doctors from England, had come for a peaceful break with their 3 children. Twins, 2 years old, and their oldest, Madeleine, just a few weeks shy of turning 4. They weren't alone. Several other families, all close friends, joined them. They were staying in apartments at the Ocean Club Resort. Relaxed, familiar, safe. Every night, the adults dined together at the same tapas restaurant just across the pool, while the children slept in their rooms. They checked on them every 20 to 30 minutes in turns. It had worked all week, until that Thursday. That night, the sun set a little slower. The wine poured a little longer. The conversation at the table drifted into laughter and stories as the ocean breeze passed softly between conversations. At 8:30 p.m., Madeleine was seen for the last time, being tucked into bed beside her siblings. She wore light pink pajamas, the ones with the little Eeyore cartoon on them. Her favorite. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. She just closed her eyes. No one saw what happened next. By 10 p.m., she was gone. No screams, no broken locks, no sign of struggle. Just an empty bed. And what happened over the next 90 minutes would become one of the most controversial disappearances in modern history. But what they found, or rather, what they failed to find, would raise questions that still haunt investigators to this day, and it all started on what was supposed to be just another night in paradise. Kate McCann walked back to the apartment at 10:01 p.m. She'd already done her routine check earlier. Everything had been fine. But something, she couldn't explain what, pushed her to go again. A feeling, a flicker in her chest. The door to apartment 5A was slightly open. That wasn't right. She remembered closing it earlier, almost all the way shut. Enough to block out light, but not enough to click. She stepped inside. Silence. The twins were asleep in their cots, peaceful, undisturbed. But Madeleine's bed was empty. No child, just a crumpled blanket, a toy, and an open window. Kate rushed to it. The shutters had been raised. The curtains were blowing in the wind. Cold air licked the room. That's when she screamed. Madeleine's gone. Back at the restaurant, everyone froze. The kind of scream that splits the air. That cuts through. Laughter and turned stomachs. Within minutes, the resort was in chaos. Guests searched hallways. Staff ran through the complex. Neighbors opened doors, shining flashlights into the dark. But there was no trace. Police were called. Locals were alerted. But confusion spread faster than action. Who had taken her? Why was the window open? And how did no one see anything? Some believed she had simply wandered off. That she would turn up, maybe in the garden, maybe at the beach. But that hope lasted less than an hour. Because as more people arrived, a sickening realization began to settle. No one had seen anything. Not a sound, not a shadow, nothing. Just a missing girl, a mother screaming, and a bed that would never be slept in again. And just when it seemed the worst had happened, investigators began to suspect. The answers weren't outside that room. They might have been inside it the entire time. The first officers arrived just before midnight. They were from the local GNR, a small-town patrol force, unprepared for international crime scenes. 2 uniformed men, no forensics team, no translators, no urgency. By the time they entered apartment 5A, the scene was already ruined. Dozens of people had come and gone. Neighbors, resort staff, friends. Some touched the bed. Others opened closets. One even picked up Madeleine's toy. It wasn't their fault. Everyone was trying to help. But in the chaos, they erased the most crucial thing the police could have had. A clean crime scene, and the window, the one Kate claimed had been open, was never dusted for fingerprints. Not that night. Not even the next morning. The lead inspector, Gonzalo Amaral, didn't arrive until later the next day. By then, the apartment had been cleaned by the resort. Mop, bleach, towels replaced. The only thing left was doubt. The Portuguese. Police didn't issue an Amber Alert. They didn't block roads or airports. They didn't even close the border. Instead, they treated the case as a missing person. A misunderstanding. A child who might have wandered off. But Madeleine was 3. She didn't speak Portuguese. She couldn't cross a resort alone. She had no shoes. Still, the theory stuck. And while Kate and Jerry McCann begged the world for help, facing cameras, holding back tears, whispers began to circulate among the investigators. What if the parents weren't telling the whole truth? It started with small things. Kate said the door had moved slightly. Jerry said it was wide open. A friend claimed the shutters were up. Another said they were closed. Their timelines didn't sync. Their emotions didn't match. And just like that, the focus of the investigation shifted. From a kidnapper to the people who reported the crime. But what the officers didn't know, or didn't believe, is that the next move they made would cost them the trust of an entire country, because just when the case needed clarity, it spiraled into something darker, something personal. At first, the world saw 2 devastated parents. Kate, pale and shaking, clutching Madeleine's favorite stuffed animal in every interview. Jerry, stoic but visibly broken, pleading for help in a language not his own. But then, the tone shifted. Within weeks, whispers became headlines. The Portuguese media began pointing fingers, not at a stranger in the dark, but at the people in the spotlight. It started with the dogs. 2 specially trained British sniffer dogs were brought in. One was trained to detect blood. The other, the scent of human decomposition. Inside apartment 5A, both dogs reacted, behind the sofa and near Kate and Jerry's wardrobe. Then came the car. Weeks after the disappearance, the McCanns had rented a silver Renault Scenic. The dogs signaled again. In the trunk, tiny traces of blood were allegedly found in the vehicle. DNA analysis was inconclusive. Partial match to Madeleine, but nothing definitive. Still, the damage was done. On September 7, 2007, 4 months after their daughter vanished, Kate and Jerry McCann were officially declared arguidos by the Portuguese police, suspects, and that one word changed everything. Public sympathy turned to suspicion. Donations slowed. Online forums exploded with theories. Why were they eating dinner away from the children? Why did they refuse to answer certain questions? Why was Kate so calm? People scrutinized her body language, the way she blinked, the way she didn't cry on camera, and that's when a darker theory emerged. What if Madeleine had died accidentally, and the parents had covered it up? A fall, a sedation gone wrong, panic, guilt, and a carefully staged disappearance. It was a theory that fed on silence, and the McCanns, following legal advice, stopped talking to police. They were afraid anything they said would be twisted. But their silence only made things worse. Even the lead investigator, Gonzalo Amaral, published a book claiming the parents were involved. The book sold thousands of copies and destroyed public trust. But there was a problem. There was still no physical evidence, no confession, no motive, no body, and just when it looked like the case would turn against them completely, it collapsed. The DNA results were ruled inconclusive. The dogs' reactions were challenged. The case file had holes. And in 2008, Kate and Jerry McCann were cleared, but not in the eyes of the world. Because by then, something irreversible had happened. They weren't just grieving parents anymore. They were part of the mystery. The McCanns weren't alone that night. They were part of a group of 7 friends, all doctors, professionals, parents, vacationing together. Every evening, the adults dined at the same restaurant. Every evening, they left their children sleeping in nearby apartments. They called themselves the Tapa 7. To avoid hiring babysitters, they took turns checking on the kids. Every 20 to 30 minutes, one of them would quietly slip away from the table, walk across the pool area, and peek into the rooms. It sounded reasonable, until it didn't. When investigators began mapping out that evening, May 3rd, things didn't line up. Some checks were missed. Others overlapped. There were contradictions in the timelines. Witnesses gave different versions of who went where and when. One said the shutter was already open. Another said it wasn't. One claimed to have seen a suspicious man carrying a child in pajamas, but couldn't recall the exact time. Even Jerry's own statement changed slightly. First he said the door was ajar, then that it was wide open. Small details, but in a case this fragile, they mattered. Then came a bigger question. Why didn't anyone hear anything? Madeleine's window faced a narrow street. Her room was right next to the path people used to get to the restaurant. But not a single person reported hearing a scream, a cry, a car door. Nothing. And the twins? Still asleep. If someone had broken in and taken a child, how did they manage it in total silence? Unless it wasn't a break-in at all. The inconsistencies began to feed suspicion, not just toward Kate and Jerry, but toward the entire group. Some believed there was a pact, an unspoken agreement to protect one another. Others said the truth was simpler: panic, misremembering, and fear. But the result was the same. The story became more tangled, the timeline more confused, and just when the case needed clarity, it faded into a fog of contradiction. But then, amid the confusion, a new possibility emerged. What if this hadn't been random? What if someone had been watching them? For days. At first, the idea sounded far-fetched, a kidnapping ring, in a quiet beach town, in a family resort. But as more pieces fell into place, the theory grew harder to ignore. Because if this wasn't an accident, if this wasn't a cover-up, then someone had planned it. The Ocean Club resort wasn't a fortress. The apartments had sliding glass doors. Some guests left them unlocked. And every evening, like clockwork, the same group of adults left their children alone. From the street, anyone watching could have memorized the routine. Who walked where, what time the lights went out, which room belonged to which child and Madeleine's. Window? It faced the back of the building, quiet, secluded, easy to reach without being seen. Then came the sightings. Several tourists reported seeing a man near the McCann's apartment in the days leading up to the disappearance. He was described as thin, tan, possibly in his 30s, with short brown hair. Some said he was lurking, others thought he was just lost, but none of them reported it at the time. Then, just hours after Madeleine vanished, a British tourist named Jane. Tanner told police she saw something chilling. A man walking briskly down the street, carrying a small blonde girl in pink pajamas. He didn't look panicked. He didn't speak. He just disappeared into the night. That image became one of the most iconic sketches of the case. For years, it was the only real lead. But there was more. Portugal had become, in the early 2000s, a known route for human trafficking, especially children. Some investigators believed Madeleine may have been taken by someone who knew how to operate in silence and vanish without a trace. Interpol was notified. Borders were monitored. But it was already too late. Whoever had taken her was gone. And just when it seemed like this might be the end of the trail, a new sighting emerged, thousands of miles away. A girl seen with a man in Morocco. Blue eyes, blonde hair, British accent. Could it be her, or was hope starting to cloud the truth? Within days, her face was everywhere, on lampposts in Portugal, in newspapers across the UK, on screens in airports, TV shows, and bus stops. Madeleine McCann wasn't just missing anymore, she had become a global symbol. The campaign was immediate and massive. A website was launched, findmadeleine.com. Donations poured in. A reward of over $2 million was offered. Celebrities like David Beckham, J.K. Rowling, and even the Pope spoke publicly in support. The McCanns flew across Europe, meeting with politicians, journalists, and investigators. They were no longer just grieving parents, they were diplomats, advocates, strategists. But with visibility came chaos. Every tip line in Europe lit up. People reported sightings from Sweden to Morocco, from Belgium to Australia. Blonde girls in parking lots, on ferries, in grocery stores. Each report brought a spark of hope, and each time it faded. The Moroccan sighting, once so promising, turned out to be a local girl who barely spoke English. A CCTV image from a gas station in Belgium? Wrong child, and yet the world kept watching. Tabloids ran wild. One paper claimed Madeleine was being held in a church. Another said she'd been smuggled on a yacht. Some even suggested she was adopted by a wealthy couple who couldn't have children. There was no proof, just speculation, headlines, and pressure. The Portuguese police, already under fire, began to push back. They accused the British media of interfering, of creating distractions, of undermining the investigation. Meanwhile, private investigators, hired by the McCanns, followed their own theories, sometimes contradicting the police entirely. The case was fractured, scattered across countries, agencies, and egos. But through it all, Madeleine's face never disappeared. She stayed in the public eye, frozen in time. A 3-year-old girl with big eyes and a shy smile. And just when the world began to lose hope, a new suspect emerged, someone who had lived nearby, someone with a record, someone who might have been watching all along. It took 13 years of theories, false leads, and silence. Then, in June of 2020, the world heard a name for the first time, Christian Bruckner, a German man, 43 years old, serving time in prison for unrelated crimes, including the rape of a 72-year-old woman in the very same region where Madeleine disappeared. He had lived just a few kilometers from the Ocean Club Resort in 2007. He owned a yellow and white camper van. He had a record of burglary, and he had a history of abusing children. Suddenly, the pieces began to align. Phone records showed that Christian had received a call on the night of May 3, 2007, just 1 hour before Madeleine vanished. The call had pinged near the McCann's apartment. He couldn't explain it. And that wasn't all. He had once bragged to a friend in a bar about knowing what happened to that little British girl. He even showed disturbing videos on his phone, videos that would later be classified as child abuse material. The German police were convinced. They called it a murder investigation. But there was a problem, the same one that had haunted the case from the beginning. No body, no weapon, no physical evidence tying Bruckner to Madeleine. Still, the prosecutors made something clear. They weren't asking for help. They were telling the world. They believe he did it. Christian denied everything. From his prison cell, he called the accusations a joke, a setup, a distraction, and legally, he wasn't even charged with the crime. Years passed. The public waited for evidence, for a confession, for anything. But all that came were more interviews, more headlines, and more silence. It was the most promising suspect the case had seen. And yet, like everything else in this investigation, even that somehow wasn't enough. By now, the case had transcended facts. It had become a canvas for doubt, speculation, and obsession. Everyone had a theory. Some pointed at the parents, claiming they showed odd behavior, didn't grieve normally, or failed too many polygraphs. They clung to the dogs, the DNA inconsistencies, the changed timelines. Others believed in the trafficking ring, that Madeleine had been followed for days, targeted, and taken across the border within hours. Then there were those who believed she was never taken at all. One theory suggested that Madeleine had died accidentally in the apartment, and that the entire group of adults, the Tapa 7, had worked together to cover it up, out of panic. Some pointed to alleged deals made with high-level diplomats. Others whispered about political interference from the UK government. The theories spiraled, some logical, others dangerous. One man, falsely accused by media reports, ended his own life. Another had his home vandalized, despite having zero connection to the case. YouTube became a battleground. Web sleuths analyzed body language, minute-by-minute timelines, shadows in old photographs. Dozens of documentaries popped up online, some claiming they had figured it all out, others accusing police, journalists, even politicians of covering up the truth. And yet, through all of it, one fact remained. No one knew where Madeleine McCann was. No confession, no footage, no verified witness, no trace. She had vanished in the most public, most scrutinized, most investigated child disappearance in modern history, without a single person ever seeing what happened. That's the paradox of the case. The more the world looked, the less it seemed to understand. And just when public interest would begin to fade, something would reignite it. A new sketch, a new witness, a new suspect, always just enough to stir hope, but never enough to bring answers. And that's what makes this story so unbearable. It isn't just the horror of what may have happened to Madeleine. It's the silence that followed, the holes in the investigation, the missed moments, the irreversible decisions, and the question that no one, not even the most powerful institutions, has ever been able to answer. How does a child vanish in plain sight? She would be 21 years old today. A young woman, maybe in college, maybe traveling, maybe walking through London with headphones in, thinking about her future. But instead, the world still sees her as a 3-year-old girl in pink pajamas, frozen in time, smiling at a camera that no longer exists. For 16 years, her story has haunted investigators, parents, and strangers around the globe. It has sparked outrage, conspiracies, division. But beneath all of it is something painfully simple: a missing child, a family that never got to say goodbye, a bedroom that was never slept in again, a birthday that's never been celebrated. The McCanns still hold out hope. Every year, they release a message, a photo, a prayer. Kate keeps Madeleine's room exactly the same, just in case. Some say hope is denial, others call it strength. But the truth? We don't know. We don't know what happened in apartment 5A. We don't know who walked past that window. We don't know if she's alive, or if she ever knew what was happening that night. We know what we missed. We know the mistakes, the wasted time, the silence, the noise. But we don't know where Madeleine McCann is, and maybe that's the hardest part. Because in a world obsessed with answers, some stories just refuse to end. So we ask you, what would you have done? What detail would you have noticed? What do you believe? And if Madeleine is still out there, maybe someone, somewhere, knows the truth. Maybe it's time to finally speak. If you have any information related to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, contact your local authorities or visit findmadeleine.com. The obscured truth, because some stories are too dark to be left in silence. If you believe more people should know the truth, like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us uncover more stories that were never meant to be forgotten.